On a quiet Sunday morning, Ray Barrett raised the stars and stripes as he did every week, never expecting this time it would get him fined. The flag caught the soft April breeze, snapping lightly against the air above Lake Remington. Sunlight filtered through the pine branches, casting gold upon the water like ripples of melted butter. Ray secured the halyard with steady hands, the kind that had once packed field radios under hostile skies, and now merely hoisted cotton and memory. He paused, letting the wind work its magic on the colors above. Scout, his Labrador, dozed nearby, one paw twitching at some dream. Inside, the old percolator murmured like an old friend. The scent of dark roast blended with the faint oil of liniment from the hallway medicine cabinet, a fragrance of age and routine. Ray poured his coffee and stood on the porch, elbow resting on the rail, eyes wandering over Veterans Meadow, at least that's what folks on this side of the lake called it, unofficially. A cluster of retired service members had settled along this shore, and the name stuck like an old war story retold at potlucks. He rocked gently in the chair his wife once favored, the woven back still bearing the faint dip where she had leaned. The porch creaked a little, sounding less like age, more like comfort. The hum of a boat motor far off mixed with soft classical music playing low from the kitchen radio, strings rising just enough to carry across floorboards. There had been something about Joanne's glance last month, at the HOA meeting, cool, sidelong, like she was measuring more than the agenda. Ray had dismissed it at the time, chalking it up to her usual veneer. That clipped voice of hers always seemed like it belonged more to a ledger than a neighbor. When he finally checked the mailbox, mid-morning, after Scout had stirred and the coffee had cooled, he wasn't expecting much more than grocery flyers or maybe a note from Ellie next door. But the envelope was thin and white, and his name typed in that formal font that always made him feel like a bureaucrat was lurking. Inside, a $50 citation. The stated reason, visual disruption due to overlarge patriotic displays. He read it twice, brow furrowing like a canvas being drawn too tightly. He looked up at the flag, swaying gently. Same flag. Same pole. Same routine for 17 years. Scout whined faintly, nose pressed to his knee. Ray sighed, setting the paper on the porch table before heading to check on Gus and Minnie. Their garden was already bright with tulips and something purple he never remembered the name of. Gus was on his knees, poking at a stubborn weed, while Minnie watered her hanging baskets with the same reverence she gave hymnals. "You two get a letter from the Queen yet?" Ray asked, gesturing with a nudge of his head toward the envelope still in his hand. Gus stood up, wiping his hands on faded denim. "Wind chimes," he muttered. "Said they were too noisy. We've had those things for 12 years. Minnie's mouth pinched tight, eyes still on her begonias. "I asked Joanne what changed, and she smiled like I was an errant child. That woman's got ideas about symmetry, I think." They spoke in the slow cadence of folks used to weathering rules, but there was a tightness in their posture. Not anger, more like a sense of something slipping that used to hold. That afternoon, Ray and Scout took the long route past Gracie's diner. The smell of bacon grease clung to the sidewalk like perfume, windows fogged slightly from lunch rush. Inside, conversations floated on the air, clipped and curious. "Can't hang my husband's medals anymore. Heard someone on Pinecrest got fined for a mailbox decal. Joanne's got a new set of bylaws coming, or so they say." Ray kept walking, but the fragments clung like burrs. The lakeshore shimmered, ducks dabbling along the reeds. His late wife, June, would have had words. Probably something sly, wrapped in silk and vinegar. Pettiness in nice envelopes, she would have said. He could almost hear it. At home, he stood in the kitchen, eyes on the refrigerator door. The letter in his hand felt less like paper and more like challenge. He folded it neatly, pinned it under a magnet shaped like the state of North Carolina, and stepped back. The flag outside kept fluttering, undeterred. Scout, who had napped through most of the afternoon, suddenly lifted his head. One bark, low, short. The kind that meant something was there, not danger, just presence. Ray opened the screen door, walking to the mailbox again. Another envelope. This one addressed in red ink. By Tuesday, Ray had received not one, but 3 new citations, from dog leash violations to mailbox dimensions. The envelopes were waiting for him like stacked insults, 1 balanced neatly on the welcome mat, 2 tucked under the red flag of his mailbox. The ink on each was impersonal, official, and slightly smug. Scout lay curled by the porch post, tail thudding once in greeting as Ray bent to pick them up. He read them in silence. The first accused him of allowing an unleashed animal to roam freely, though Scout hadn't moved more than 10 feet from the porch in days. The second cited his mailbox, installed 17 years ago, as non-compliant with updated dimension codes. The third dinged him for weather-worn flag hardware, specifically a slightly rusted clip on the halyard. Ray didn't speak. He simply carried the letters inside, laid them beside yesterday's, and poured his coffee. The morning air coming off Lake Remington was brisk but pleasant, and the distant hum of mowers buzzed across the lawns like a sleepy insect. From his porch he could see Gus bending stiffly over the rose patch, Minnie trailing behind with pruning shears. As Ray stepped out to greet them, Joanne Withers appeared, heels clicking against the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, smile sharp as a paper cut. "Mr. Barrett," she said. "I trust you received the notices." "I did," he replied, voice even. "Excellent. We're doing a neighborhood sweep for compliance. Order brings dignity to any neighborhood, wouldn't you agree?" She tilted her head just enough for the glint of her earring to catch the sun. He didn't answer, just nodded once. Scout remained seated, watching Joanne with the same wary patience Ray had begun to adopt. Joanne turned on her heel and strode toward Gus and Minnie's yard. Minnie shifted her weight, shielding a newly planted lily from view. Gus stood straighter than usual, jaw tight. Ray lingered a moment longer, then decided he needed breakfast, and perhaps the comfort of Earl's scissors to take the edge off. Gracie's diner was half full, the smell of bacon and fried potatoes mixing with cheap aftershave and fresh-cut grass. Ray slid into his regular booth. 2 eggs, grits, black coffee, he told the waitress without needing a menu. She gave him a tired but fond smile. Outside, a young woman in jeans and a windbreaker was snapping photos near the community board. Her camera lens glinted as she zoomed in on a freshly taped notice, a single page with dense text, HOA letterhead barely visible in the corner. Earl's barber shop sat next to the bait store, its striped poles still spinning like time refused to stop there. Earl waved Ray in, gesturing to the empty chair. The familiar snip of shears began. 3 people came in yesterday with citations, Earl muttered, barely above a whisper. Bird feeder wrong height. Garden hose not coiled properly. What's going on? Ray met his eyes in the mirror. Same thing as always. Just dressed in finer paper. After the cut, he passed Gus's yard again. The roses had been pulled. Only small divots of damp soil remained, like unhealed wounds. She said they encroached on public walkway space, Gus said quietly, not looking up. That bush was Minnie's favorite. Ray didn't respond. He went home, opened the junk drawer, and pulled out an old, scuffed notebook, his field log from days long past. The pages were yellowing but crisp. He wrote 3 entries. April 9th, Citation 1, Unleashed Animal, false. Citation 2, Mailbox, unchanged since 2008, HOA approved. Citation 3, Flag clip, minor rust, no safety hazard. Below that he added. Joanne delivered in person. Tone formal. No discussion allowed. Scout looked up at him, brow furrowed as if in understanding. Ray reached down, scratched behind her ears. As the sun edged higher, he made his way to the community board. The woman with the camera, Tasha Linwood, if he recalled correctly from the paper, was gone. But the notice remained. He stepped closer. Effective April 1st, Amendment to Community Compliance Code 7.4.3 regarding decorative standards and lawn visibility. Mailbox guidelines revised under subsection B. Ray narrowed his eyes. No vote. No announcement. Just posted quietly, in 6-point font, among flyers for piano lessons and yard sales. He walked back toward Gus, who stood now with a hose in one hand, looking defeated. Ray held up his notebook. "If they want the rulebook followed," he said, "then let's follow it all the way, down to the comma." Back inside, he flipped through the contact list in the back of the notebook. Some names were long gone. But one, etched in military block, remained. He dialed. "Skipper. It's Ray. Time to visit." When the old RV pulled up to Ray's driveway, its engine sputtered, but the Marine Corps decal gleamed like new. Scout perked up first, ears twitching before letting out a low chuff. Ray stepped off the porch just in time to see the wide, sun-bleached vehicle roll to a stop with a sighing hiss. The passenger door creaked open, and from it emerged a shape nearly unchanged by time, broad shoulders, deep crow's feet, and a cap with USMC retired stitched above the bill. Skipper grinned. "Heard you're in a war without bullets." Ray didn't answer at first. He just stepped forward and wrapped his arms around his old friend. The embrace held more than words could say. When they pulled back, there was a quiet look exchanged, memory, loss, loyalty, all in one breath. "Still drink that canned root beer?" Skipper asked. "I keep a stash for emergencies," Ray replied, cracking a smile. The two men worked in unison to level the RV on the gravel by Ray's house. Inside, the rig was lived in but neatly folded blankets, a stack of laminated maps, and a small wall of pinned photos from bases long disbanded. The coffee thermos on the table looked like it had served in more deployments than either of them. Outside, the midday sun warmed the sidewalk. Tasha Linwood's camera shutter clicked as she stood across the street, capturing the Marine decal, the handshake, the slow return of something resolute. She gave Ray a half salute. "So, is this an uprising?" she asked, only half joking. "Just catching up with an old friend," Ray replied evenly. "Over tea and bylaws." Gus and Minnie watched from their porch, the silence between them tinged with hope. Gus raised a hand. Ray nodded in return. The rest of the afternoon unfolded like old drills, efficient and measured. Skipper opened a binder, flipping to the HOA charter Ray had been collecting, alongside county code printouts. He grunted. "This section here, landscaping proximity, conflicts directly with county setback requirements." Ray leaned over his shoulder. "Meaning?" "Meaning they can't enforce it, not legally. You could get this tossed with a letter from zoning." Skipper tapped another paragraph. "And here, flag display height. State protection clauses override that nonsense." They read through page after page, highlighting, annotating, and stacking evidence like a supply chain on deployment. Later, they walked Scout down to Gus's yard. Minnie had gathered fresh seedlings, but the patch where the rosebushes once bloomed was now bare. "We measured from the sidewalk," Ray said. 36 inches clear, exactly to code." They dug, patted soil, aligned each plant with a carpenter's level. Skipper even brought out a yardstick, clicking it into place with a theatrical flourish. "I'd like to see someone call that encroachment," he said. Ray chuckled softly. Toward dusk, they returned to the porch, each with a frosty root beer in hand. The breeze brought the scent of honeysuckle from across the lake. Scout curled between them, tail twitching in contentment. "You ever think we'd retire like this?" Skipper asked. "Not exactly," Ray replied. "But I figured we'd still be checking rulebooks." They talked about old mess halls, mismatched boots, and the one cook who thought curry belonged in every dish. Sandra's name came up, gently, like a bird landing on a branch, remembered without breaking anything. Then a shadow fell across the lawn. Joanne stood at the edge of the property, arms crossed, blazer crisp even in the falling light. "Mr. Barrett," she called. "I must caution you, bringing outsiders into private matters can escalate things." Skipper rose slowly, not unkindly. "Ma'am, I'm just helping a friend garden." She looked him over, pursed her lips, and walked away without further word. Ray said nothing. He leaned back, letting the swing creak once beneath him. As the sky darkened, headlights approached again, a postal van. The carrier stepped out, handed Ray a thick envelope stamped with red ink and a certified seal. Ray opened it under the porch light. Mandatory disciplinary hearing. HOA Council. Date and time in bold. He folded it, slowly, deliberately, and set it beside his root beer. The library's folding chairs filled fast, not for book club, but for a public reading of HOA bylaws, led by 2 old Marines and a Labrador. By the time Ray arrived with Scout ambling at his side and Skipper hauling a plastic bin of binders, the side room at Redwood Cove Public Library was already buzzing. A tray of homemade oatmeal cookies sat near the entrance, kids scribbled quietly at a coloring table in the back, and the local librarian, Miss Carla, beamed from behind her desk, eyes twinkling like she'd been waiting for this day since the Nixon era. Ray set his thermos on the table. "Looks like we've got quorum," he said. Skipper flipped open the first binder. "Time to read the rules. All of them." Tasha Linwood adjusted her seat up front, notepad already open. "You weren't kidding, huh?" "Nope," Ray replied. "If they want order, let's deliver regulation-level order." Scout stretched beside the podium like a well-trained mascot. His graying snout twitched once, then settled. Skipper began. Section 3.4.7, Visual Enhancements, subsection C. It is stated that no decorative feature may exceed 6 inches in elevation from the front lawn, unless approved in writing. Now refer to Section 7.2, Mailbox Assembly Requirements, which mandates an 8-inch base for visibility. He looked up. That's 2 rules. One contradicts the other. So which is it? Murmurs rippled across the room. Earl leaned over to Gus and whispered something that made Minnie chuckle. Ray stepped forward, unfolding a page. And Section 5.1.1, Flag Displays. Says, no vertical poles allowed in front yards. Yet federal law, Title IV, U.S. Code, protects the right to display the American flag, provided it's maintained properly. Joanne Withers stood from the side wall, arms folded tightly over a blazer the color of granite. The board reserves interpretation rights, she said sharply. As elected by a majority vote. Skipper smiled, serene as a minister at confession. Then you'll want to see this. He handed her a copy of a printed county ordinance. Per Buncombe County statutes, any HOA operating within county limits must align with federal and state law. That includes provisions on flag display and landscaping access. Leonard Price, the treasurer, sank a little in his seat. Tasha scribbled notes at rapid pace, underlining phrases like federal protection and interpretation rights challenged. Ray walked over to young Haley, who was bouncing a toddler on one knee. He knelt beside her, holding out a form. Swing set violation, he asked. She nodded, almost embarrassed. They said it's structurally unsightly. But it's plastic. Ray pointed to a clause on the paper. Standard play equipment under 6 feet. Exempt. Sign this petition and it gets logged with the county ombudsman. She took the pen with a small smile. From the back of the room, someone brought up a folding chair to offer to an older man who'd just walked in. The room had gone from passive irritation to simmering engagement. Skipper flipped to another tab. Now let's talk light bulbs. Section 6.3 mandates only cool white exterior lighting, but Section 8.2 requires porch lights to match the neighborhood's historical tone, which includes amber hues, according to this board's own minutes from 2009. Groans this time. One woman clapped, half in disbelief. Joanne interrupted again, voice clipped. The board will reconvene privately on these matters. Ray stepped to the front. No need to rush. I filed for formal arbitration with the County HOA Oversight Board. Every document submitted, every citation recorded. We'll let impartial eyes decide. There was no cheer, no applause, just a breath. A collective, quiet acknowledgement that someone had finally stood up, not with shouting, but with paperwork. Skipper rested a hand on Ray's shoulder. Scout thumped his tail once. As folks began to trickle out, pausing to shake Ray's hand or offer cookies in folded napkins, Joanne leaned toward Leonard. Her voice barely carried, but Tasha, still scribbling close by, caught it nonetheless. "Then we hit him where it hurts," Joanne hissed. The dock. Ray arrived home to find yellow tape strung across his dock, and Scout whining beside it. The tape fluttered in the lake breeze like some cheap warning from a crime scene show, stretched taut between the rusted hooks on each post. Scout sat low, ears down, as if he'd done something wrong. But Ray knew better. The dock had stood there, quiet, sturdy, for more than 20 years. He'd rebuilt it board by board after Sandra passed, sanding each plank until the grain ran smooth beneath his hands. It had never needed approval. Not until now. Safety Review, the sign read. 3 words stamped in red over a laminated sheet, zip-tied like a gag over memories. Ray crouched beside Scout and ran his hand along the old dog's back. "They're poking at ghosts now," he whispered. From across the road, Joanne's heels clicked on pavement, precise as a metronome. She approached with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We regret the inconvenience," she said, eyes skimming the tape. "But unregistered structures must be reviewed under amended Section 9.1 of the HOA's Environmental Compliance Addendum." Ray stood, slow and level. "That dock's older than half the houses in this development." She tilted her head. "Which is precisely why it must be brought up to modern code. And as for your pet..." Scout let out a soft huff, tail thudding weakly. "We've received multiple complaints about off-leash activity," Joanne continued, slipping a paper from her folder. "Under Section 12.4b, he's now considered a Class 1 nuisance animal. We recommend either a muzzle in public areas, or removal." Skipper's voice cut through the rising heat. "That dog's seen more decency in a day than your entire rulebook has in a year." Joanne didn't flinch. "You're not a resident here, Mr. Sergeant Mathis." "Retired," Skipper said. "And you're leaning real hard into harassment." She gave him a tight nod and walked off, heels echoing like gavel taps. Ray stayed silent as he unhooked the tape. He didn't rip it, just folded it neatly and placed it inside the mailbox. Scout followed him up the steps, slower than usual. Later, at the library, Tasha flipped through her notes with growing concern. "This isn't just about you anymore, Ray. I've spoken to Haley, Earl, even that teenager from Lot 12, they've all been fined, pushed, threatened. My editor's interested. HOA overreach is turning into a pattern piece." "I don't want headlines," Ray said. "I want dignity." "Then let the truth be dignified," Tasha replied. "You're not alone." But Ray felt it anyway. At dusk, the dock sat cordoned, silent in the breeze. Scout lay curled beside Ray's feet, head resting on his paws. A neighborhood boy named Theo stopped his bike, looked at the tape, and then at Ray. "My mom said that dock's yours," he said. It was. The boy reached into his backpack and pulled out a piece of cardboard. With a blue crayon, he'd written, "This dock belongs to Grandpa Ray." He taped it to the post and rode off. Ray didn't speak. He just looked at the sign for a long while before standing up to make his evening tea. The next morning, the house was too quiet. Scout didn't come when Ray called. His bed was empty. The back gate hung open by an inch. Ray's breath caught in his chest as he spotted the door hanger flapping in the wind, county seal, printed notice. Animal removal order executed per violation code. He sat on the porch, leash still in hand. His fingers tightened around it until the nylon creaked. "They've crossed a line," he murmured. Then he rose and walked inside, opening the drawer where he kept documents too heavy to touch. Inside, beneath his military discharge papers and Sandra's old recipe clippings, lay a sealed envelope marked, "VA Legal Team, Reserved Use Only." He laid it on the table. And began to open it. Ray stood on his porch, tie slightly crooked, holding a manila folder, as the county inspector's car rolled in. The morning had started like any other, with Scout sleeping by the screen door and the scent of honeysuckle drifting from Gus and Minnie's yard. But the manila folder in Ray's hand was proof that today would be different. Inside were pages meticulously prepared by the VA legal team, highlighted violations, copies of HOA correspondence, and a list of ordinances they had knowingly bent. Mr. Hawkins stepped out of his county vehicle with a worn briefcase and a handshake that had some heft to it. In his mid-70s, with silver hair and horn-rimmed glasses, he looked more like a retired history teacher than a regulator. "Mr. Barrett?" he asked, glancing at the file in Ray's hand. "That's me," Ray said, motioning toward the porch swing. "Hope you like banana bread. Minnie insists visitors don't leave hungry." As they settled in, Ray walked him through the paper trail, the citations, the rule changes passed without community vote, and most damning of all, the conflicting mandates between HOA bylaws and county regulations. Mr. Hawkins listened carefully, nodding, occasionally jotting something in a lined notebook. "So this stock business," Mr. Hawkins asked, tapping a finger on one of the forms, "they cited you for unregistered alterations?" Ray nodded. "It's been here 30 years. HOA never said a word, until I started asking questions." Hawkins didn't answer immediately. Instead, he flipped through the documentation and said, "Well, Mr. Barrett, it appears the HOA has overstepped in several areas. I'll need to file an injunction to halt their enforcement actions while we conduct a full review." Ray exhaled slowly. Not a victory, not yet, but the tide was shifting. Later that afternoon, a county van pulled into his driveway again, this time returning Scout. The Labrador's eyes looked duller than Ray remembered, his tail slower to wag. A vet's note taped to the carrier confirmed it, minor bruising and signs of stress. Skipper clenched his jaw but said nothing. Ray knelt down, gently stroking Scout's fur. "You're home, soldier," he whispered. By evening, the potluck at Redwood Cove's community center buzzed louder than usual. Tasha was already there, standing near a folding table littered with casseroles, pies, and banana pudding. Her headline had gone live, "Redwood vs. the Rulebook." It wasn't inflammatory, just sharp, naming the citations, the impoundment, the silence of the HOA board. Gus and Minnie stood near the punch bowl, hesitant. Ray gave them a nod of encouragement, and with a gentle prod from Skipper, they approached the mic near the bandstand. "Used to be," Gus began, voice quivering slightly, "that HOA meant neighbors helping neighbors. Now, it feels like we're all waiting for the next letter." Minnie added, "We were told our roses violated aesthetics. But we planted those when our son came home from his first deployment. They're not decorations, they're memories." Applause broke out, soft at first, then growing. Back at home, Scout curled up near Ray's feet as he read the official letter from Mr. Hawkins. The county had launched a formal audit of Redwood Cove's HOA, granting them 30 days to comply with regulations or face dissolution of enforcement powers. Ray sipped his sweet tea slowly, eyes fixed on the horizon, where clouds bruised the evening sky. The war wasn't over, but he finally had a map. The next morning, he stepped outside to fetch the paper. Joanne's car was gone from her driveway. Not just moved, gone. Later, when Ray walked by the HOA office with Scout, he noticed something stranger, the door locked, blinds drawn, no flyers on the bulletin board. For the first time in weeks, silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt like pause, like breath. And still, the manila folder stayed on the kitchen table, opened, ready. On a sunny morning, residents gathered around folding chairs, not for a picnic, but to hear the results of a financial audit. The community hall, usually a quiet backdrop for quilt shows and church bake sales, now buzzed with anticipation. Small American flags fluttered from the railing, casting jittery shadows on the concrete steps. Purple spring blossoms swayed gently beneath the windows. Every seat was taken. Ray adjusted the white shirt he'd ironed that morning. It still carried a faint scent of starch and lavender. He held a thick folder in his hands, its edges slightly bent from rereading. Skipper stood next to him, arms folded, eyes scanning the room with quiet vigilance. Mr. Hawkins stepped forward. He no longer carried the mild tone of a visitor. Today, his voice rang with authority. "We've concluded our audit of the Redwood Cove Homeowners Association," he began, unfolding a packet. "Our team found several irregularities." He listed them one by one. First, over $18,000 in administrative fees without receipts. Second, overlapping payments to board members, including duplicate reimbursements. Third, the HOA's failure to report land holdings, specifically, the lakefront easement, under Joanne Withers' name, rather than the association's. Murmurs rippled through the room. A few people gasped. Last week, Mr. Hawkins continued, we obtained video evidence submitted by a community member, Miss Linwood. All eyes turned to Tasha, who stood near the back with her phone held upright. She tapped the screen. A grainy video flickered onto a projection screen, Joanne's voice, clipped and unmistakable. Don't let the residents see that easement paperwork. Just file it under my name for now, it's cleaner. The room went still. Then came a voice from the front, Skipper's, calm but firm. According to North Carolina Statute 47F-3-120, if 2/3 of HOA members vote for dissolution, the board loses all enforcement authority until a restructuring vote is held. Ray opened his folder. Inside were ballots, neatly printed and ready. You all have the right to choose, he said. People took their time. Haley, the pastor's wife, raised her hand first. Then Gus. Then Minnie. Soon hands lifted like a wave, slow but inevitable. Even Earl, who rarely left the barbershop, nodded solemnly as he marked his paper. When the last ballot was counted, Mr. Hawkins returned to the front. With over 72% in favor, he announced, the HOA, as constituted, is hereby dissolved pending state review. Applause followed, steady, not thunderous. A sigh of relief shared among neighbors. And then, the doors opened. Joanne Withers stood at the threshold. Her blazer was crisp, her heels sharp against the tile. But her usual veneer was cracked. She walked forward, voice raised. This is unlawful. I am still president until the review is finalized. The applause stopped. Silence returned. From the second row, a man in a deputy's uniform stood up. His badge, though dulled with age, still gleamed. He walked slowly forward. Ma'am, he said, voice low but unwavering, I believe you're trespassing. Joanne's eyes darted, lips twitching. But no one moved to stop the old officer. No one came to her side. She turned, slowly, and walked out. Scout, lying under Ray's chair, let out a single, sharp bark, then rested his head back down, the rhythm of his breath even and calm. Flags waved gently on Memorial Day, and the lake was quiet, but there was music coming from the old HOA lawn. A slow breeze passed over Veterans Meadow, the new wooden sign catching light in golden streaks. Someone had hammered it in with care that morning, painted by hand with simple block letters. The old HOA building behind it stood locked, shutters drawn. But the grass was trimmed, and folding tables lined the walkway, draped in red and white checkered cloths. Ray Barrett stood beside the new flagpole, his blueprint had become reality. The pole rose clean and straight from the earth, set with bolts that gleamed. At its top, the stars and stripes flapped steadily. Ray wore his faded marine dress shirt, buttons polished but not flashy. He wasn't one for speeches, but today didn't need one. Across the field, Scout trotted with the loping gait of an old dog on a good day, his ears flopping and nose to the wind. Children squealed nearby, chasing bubbles and bouncing rubber balls across the newly reseeded lawn. Ray watched him with a quiet pride, that kind that rests deep in the chest and asks nothing in return. Skipper knelt beside a boy with a scraped knee, pulling a small tin from his pack. He dabbed ointment, then pulled from his pocket a cloth badge, their old unit insignia, frayed at the edges. You hold on to this, he said. It's not about fighting. It's about showing up. Under the sycamore tree, Gus and Minnie poured lemonade into mismatched cups. She passed around ginger snaps while he called out names like a bingo caller, Earl, second glass for you, no excuses. Their laughter rolled out like Sunday morning bells. Near the edge of the gathering, Tasha adjusted her camera lens. She focused not on the flag or the crowd, but on Ray, standing still with one hand resting on Scout's head. Her notebook peeked out of her messenger bag, the cover scribbled with a headline, "One man, one flag, one town." Ray noticed her watching and walked over. He handed her a worn folder. "This is the paper trail. The citations, letters, photos. All of it." She hesitated. "Do you want your name on it?" "Don't make me famous," he said. "Just tell it straight." Tasha nodded once, her voice low. "I will." From the speaker set on the picnic table, a recorded voice came through, Skippers, reading from a poem they once heard in silence overseas. They asked for no parades. No thanks, no banners high. But still we gather, year by year. Beneath the same clear sky. The field fell quiet, the only sounds a soft bird song and the flutter of flags along the grass line. Even the youngest children paused, as if something in the air told them to. Joanne's car idled at the street's edge. Her window was down, her chin resting on the wheel. She watched from behind glass, but never stepped out. Ray returned to the flagpole. From the small cedar chest by his feet, he lifted a folded triangle, cloth carefully preserved. It was old, the blue faded, the white stars softened from time. It had once draped the coffin of his older brother, the one who never made it home. He climbed 2 rungs of the ladder and tied it himself. Not a word spoken. Not a command given. The new flag lifted into place. Gus approached from behind, placing a hand on Ray's shoulder. "We got our town back," he said. Ray nodded. "We did." They stood together until the wind shifted again and Scout let out a long sigh. He curled near the base of the flagpole, eyes half closed, tail still. Ray eased down onto the grass beside him, the shade stretching long. "Let's just sit a while, boy," he murmured. And they did. The meadow was quiet now, save for the soft rustle of flags and children's laughter echoing through the trees. Ray never set out to lead a cause, he simply stood his ground, and in doing so, reminded a town what dignity looks like when shared. When rules are used for good, communities thrive; when they're misused, they crumble. Perhaps it's never too late to speak softly, stand firmly, and rebuild something better with your neighbors by your side. Like an old flag raised against the morning light, one quiet act of defiance can catch the wind and carry everyone home.